Hey guys, welcome back to another Honkai Star Rail video. Last 5-star unit that came out was Silver Wolf, who's been taking the meta by storm with their unique breaking abilities, and the next 5-star to come out is Luocha, a very strapping, mature-looking gentleman with the most unusual combination of attributes. I don't know about you, but when I saw him for the first time with Sushang, I got very sussy vibes, but maybe that might just be me. Anyways, in a similar fashion to my Silver Wolf video, I wanted to discuss Luocha's place in the meta and what purpose he serves in addition to giving a rundown of his abilities and whatnot. So let's not waste any more time and get right into it. In contrast to Sila, Jingyuan, and Silver Wolf, who are primarily situated in offense, Luocha is going to be our first unit to be part of the supportive family, that being Preservation, Abundance, and Harmony. In this case, Abundance. Based on my experience playing many gachas, there's a lot of emphasis on DPS in the early game since we have a primitive and premature understanding of the meta. But over time, as more updates, enemies, and whatnot come out, support characters become a bigger deal. So while I was taking a look at discourse over Luocha, the consensus was more divided compared to the first 3 featured 5-stars. Currently, there hasn't been a whole lot of exploration in the defensive support department, namely because we don't have a lot of units to choose from, especially across the greater meta. Bailu, and Natasha are really the only primarily defensive supports. There's Fire Trailblazer, March, and Clara, but they're more of a hybrid in offense and defense. This means Luocha will be the first widely accessible 5-star healer in Star Rail, thus raising questions on how important healing and protective utility will be in Star Rail. Unlike in Genshin, where you have the option to dodge enemy attacks or exploit the invincibility frames brought on by elemental bursts, you don't have that luxury in Star Rail, so having a way to either mitigate or recover from damage is of paramount importance. Fortunately, everyone has Natasha, but with Forgotten Hall Memory of Chaos necessitating 2 parties of 4, you'll need someone else to heal or shield the other side. So is Luocha worth pulling for? Short answer, it depends. Even though defensive utility carries more equity in Star Rail, deciding on whether or not you should go out of your way for him is unclear, especially if you already have Bailu or to a lesser extent Japard, and of course Natasha. So I want to spend this video comparing them. Since you get Natasha for free, she's the benchmark for what a healer should do. Her skill is a single target heal accompanied by regeneration per turn, and her ultimate is a wide area heal. Very simple. The rest of her talents aim to supplement that healing, such as dispelling debuffs, reducing enemy damage, or adding an extra turn to regen. Now let's see what Luocha has to offer. Like Natasha, his skill offers an immediate heal, but instead of scaling off HP, it's off his attack. Alongside that, he gains a stack of Abyss Flower, which, while held, whenever a teammate or himself drops below 50% health, his skill automatically casts on them without costing any skill points. So it's kind of like an insurance policy, although it has a short cooldown attached to it. As for his ultimate, unlike Natasha and Bailu, it's a damaging ability, dispelling 1 buff from all enemies, dealing a bit of imaginary damage, and giving him an Abyss Flower stack. Now when he has 2 Abyss Flowers on deck, they're automatically consumed to create a field for 2 turns. During this time, when your party attacks the enemy, they heal for a small amount. You can think of it like lifesteal. This can make Luocha decently SP efficient since both his healing aspects are quote-unquote passive. You do have to spend SP to get Abyss Flower stacks initially, but afterwards your team can regen naturally provided you can maintain his ultimate or end the fight quickly. One aspect of his kit that's worth mentioning is that the lifesteal effect can open up the possibility of self-sustaining teams. For example, Clara's whole shtick is that she's the counterattack tank. Anytime she takes damage, she fires back. Through his field, Clara can stay healthy while retaliating against enemy fire. I'd imagine the same applies to follow-up attacks like Himeko and Jingyuan. Luocha is more of an offensive healing enabler rather than defensive, but that doesn't mean he comes without protective utility. His first trace is identical to Natasha, cleansing a negative status effect from whoever he uses his skill on. Cleansing is very important to have in Star Rail and is one of the main downsides of Bailu actually. God forbid your DPS or the supports get impaired, you need to cleanse them ASAP, otherwise it might ruin your entire burst rotation, and with Star Rail's turn-based system, every action counts. The key selling point of Luocha is that he offers more situationally applicable healing compared to Natasha and Bailu, who offer conventional healing. While on a cooldown, the Abyss Flower emergency heal can come in handy as it activates the instant someone drops to critical health. If the enemy team gets a lot of attacks onto one of your units, they might not survive until Nat's next turn, whereas Luocha's Abyss Flower can protect them. Then there's the offensive healing aspect with the regeneration field. Provided it works with follow-up attacks, which I actually neglected to check when I was testing him out, I really should have thought of that, but it has no reason not to. Luocha can synergize famously with the existing pool of DPS carries. Jingyuan gets to heal every time he follows up with Lightning Lord, Sila gets to heal with every extra turn, Clara gets to heal off every counterattack she deals, Himeko gets to heal off every weakness break essentially, and Yanqing basically strikes twice per turn with his talent. Regardless of who's on your team, you'll make very liberal use of Luocha's field. So let's line up every character. Natasha is your standard generalist healer. Not too great, not too bad. Her only main problem is that she struggles against burst damage. Regeneration per turn is irrelevant if you get one-shotted, which can and will happen. Gepard, while not a healer, is a defensive wall, figuratively and literally. He's the best when it comes to burst resistance thanks to the massive shield on his ultimate, but if the shield breaks before he gets it back up, you're fighting an uphill battle. If you can refresh his ultimate before the shield breaks, your team is practically invincible. If you can. Bailu is a super healer. Among her, Nat, and Luocha, she has the highest healing in most situations. She also has terrific AoE coverage through her skill splashing onto multiple targets beyond the first, and her ultimate being a huge AoE heal, plus the talent that heals on hit and allows one teammate to survive fatal damage. However, this comes at the cost of lacking any cleanse in her kit, which as I mentioned can be debilitating in certain fights. Essentially, if you're certain you don't need a cleanse, Bailu is without question the best of the three in terms of raw healing. Luocha is a combat healer. He has a token amount of on-demand healing, but most of his recovery stems from dealing damage to the enemy or dropping below half HP. Though this makes him more situational, he can potentially offer better sustained first party than even Bailu in those situations. That being said, if we're talking about a long-term survival scenario like Simulated Universe, his technique allows for on-demand healing, so you're not entirely dependent on combat sustain. Furthermore, he has a Dispel. Dispels can come in handy against enemies with critical buffs you have to worry about, if not now, then later on. His weakness is that he's exclusively single target healing. Technically, his skill and talent can affect everyone on his team, but never simultaneously. He'll struggle quite heavily against consecutive area damage like the Doomsday Beast, which can hit everyone at once multiple times per sequence. Granted, his anti-burst measures increase the likelihood of your party surviving to then take their individual turns to heal, but you don't have as comfortable of a safety margin compared to the likes of Bailu. Moreover, unless you have very solid energy recharge, spamming his ultimate might be a challenge, which he kind of needs to for the lifesteal field unless you want to dip into your skill points. Basically, he might struggle with consistency until you build him to endgame status. Having said all of that, it's understandable why some players are unsure as to whether or not it's worth pulling for him. Unlike Seela, who's better than every DPS unit in the game, or Jingyuan, who's the clear best for AoE damage, or Silver Wolf, who's one of the best units in the game in terms of utility, Luocha doesn't have that same kind of meta-shattering presence for lack of a better phrase. He's more of a side grade to Natasha and Bailu, not really an upgrade, and given it takes the average person anywhere between $100 or so to get him, it really comes down to how much you value coverage. That's ultimately what decides if you should pull for him or not. Most players don't have both Nat and Bailu, they only have the former, so this could be an opportunity for you to grab Luocha for some better coverage. And while this isn't too big of a selling point, imaginary damage is still few and far between, as Walt is the only imaginary unit in the game and he's a 5-star, so not many people have him. That extra bit of imaginary damage could come in handy against enemies with a weakness to it, and gives you an extra reason to use him. For players with more discretionary income and don't have Bailu, Luocha is definitely worth considering. For players who want to save money and already have Bailu, you can safely make do without him in my opinion. Free-to-play players who have Bailu, 100% skip, your jades would be better spent elsewhere. Free-to-play players who don't have Bailu, I would say sleep on it. Don't make a decision right away, give it a week or so and mull it over a bit. Last thing I want to talk about is, of course, weapon. Luocha's Light Cone, Echoes of the Coffin, specializes in boosting attack, speed, and increasing the uptime on his ultimate. So in typical MiHoYo fashion, the character's signature weapon conveniently makes him more consistent and easier to optimize, but assuming you don't feel like wailing for weapons, and I don't blame you, post-op conversation is the best bang for your buck with the energy recharge and healing bonus. Quid pro quo, aside from having arguably the most adorable picture, isn't half bad of a support weapon, but sadly the energy will never go to him. Still usable though. You can also try Shared Feeling to boost your healing and give more energy to everybody. Because Luocha doesn't heal based on HP, Bailu's signature weapon is suboptimal on him. So if you don't have his own weapon or don't want to get it, my best recommendation is post-op conversation with Shared Feeling or Quid pro quo as alternatives. As for teams, like I said, the bulk of Luocha's healing depends on how many attacks your team can do. So anyone with multiple attacks or lots of AoE damage, which frankly is every 5-star DPS, will be just fine. He comes off as situational, but at the same time isn't really that much. He will for sure be a good addition to teams using Seela, given she can attack multiple times with her resets. I would say the main caveat with him in terms of team building is that you ideally want your entire team to consist of characters with damaging skills or ultimates. That way you can get more procs of his lifesteal. Overall, I think Luocha's potential has yet to be fully unlocked in the current metagame. Bailu still reigns supreme if we focus purely on healing and survivability, but Luocha might be more conducive to offensive-oriented teams. TLDR, if you have Natasha and Bailu, you can safely skip him if you have a tight budget. If you don't have Bailu, then Luocha warrants consideration just so you have 2 healers for a memory of chaos. As I went over in the Silver Wolf video, supports will generally withstand the test of time longer than DPS characters, especially in turn-based games because their value escalates with the meta. For example, if 1 to 2 years from now more units come out who are like Seela and can attack multiple times per turn, Luocha's healing will become that much more efficient. That's something to think about as well. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today's video. Hope you found this insightful. Let me know what your thoughts are on Luocha in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with my points. Aside from that, I'd appreciate it if you could give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and why not check out my Silver Wolf video if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.